So I wanted to make this video, but you know what? All right, shooting from the hip again. This is all gonna be raw, right rolling off the tongue. That kind of sounded pretty fucked up. All right, shooting from the hip. So here's the deal. I want to talk about what modern cars do right. I don't want to just make my videos about the negative aspects, even though I do think very negatively on the modern car market and the cars that are being built today. But I want to talk to you about some cars that I think do it right, or just cars, what the modern cars in general today do right. Well, when you strive for things like perfection, it's awfully quite boring. Now, I think this depends person to person and comes preferably at what your choices are, like your personal preferences. Modern cars today are really quiet. Now, me, the way I like cars, I like personality. I don't like quiet cars. And I'm going to be honest, I think a lot of people actually like and prefer cars with more personality than cars that don't sound like anything. But there is a market of people that like hearing nothing out of their cars. They like them being quiet. And how the quietness aspect of the cars comes into play is that we've refined the aspects that make the car quiet, as in we've put the way the harmonics in the engine are send minimal vibrations through the cab. The way that the interior and sound deadening is crafted is you can't really hear anything from the outside. You could be going 100 miles per hour and you're not going to hear it. And not just hear it, but cars today are so refined, you could be setting your cruise control at 100 and you're not even going to feel it. The sense of speed is so, we've pushed technology in today's modern day time so far that in such a short period of time, to be honest, because even if you go back 10 years ago, you can feel, you have a better sensation of your surroundings than you do now. Now, obviously, that's a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. I'm gonna try and keep it on the good aspects at least. There are people out there that do like things that are very refined, things that are, futuristic, things that are just kind of like the perfect culmination of, maybe style or class. Maybe you don't always want to hear your car running or have that sense of speed. Maybe you just want to hop in the car and have the car take you from one place to the other. And that's fine. I think there should be a market for you for that. Obviously, the negative aspect would be to, have a balance between the two. And right now it's kind of leaning in the wrong direction too much. There I go on the negative aspect of it. But I think that the idea of the technology is fine. Don't get me wrong. I think we've accomplished a lot, especially with engines like the EcoBoost engines, like the modern day Coyote motors, like the Chevy motors. I think we haven't even actually skimmed the surface of what we could do technologically wise. Every single time we think there's a limit, it could always be refined or be made better. The idea of it is, though, when you take a lot of things into play, like price, time of manufacturing, what the market is actually looking for and wanting, obviously technological advancements and simplicity, and in some cases engineering, will be put on the back burner or be pushed forward to further enhance whatever type of climate the cars are being made in. So right now we're doing a lot of making things luxurious. So a lot of the modern day cars are very sleek and almost streamlined, quiet, make pretty decent horsepower out of smaller displacement engines. Now, I do see the problems with that. Like I said, I'm trying to keep this video more positive. I think it is nice to an extent that certain engines are made this way. I think the platforms are good. I just think that they're maybe a little bit misplaced. Like let's say the Bronco comes with a 3-cylinder turbocharged engine, which I believe it does. I believe it's the 3-cylinder turbocharged engine. But in my personal opinion, I think a bigger engine in a Bronco, especially like maybe a V8 or something like that, would do it more justice. I think the Ford Rangers having tiny little 2.3 liter turbo motors, does the truck get up and move around? Yes, it does. I think it puts a little bit of stress on an engine like that, even though they might not have as many problems. I just think that we're pushing the engineering to its absolute limit, and that's good to an extent, but it's so hard to stay positive because I just want to label the good aspects. The engines, the late model engines are actually made pretty stoutly. I don't think the issue is just as much as the engineering of the engine itself. I think the complexity has something to do with it, and that complexity is making it kind of hard to match these modern day standards. So, and unfortunately, I think the dealerships' arms are being twisted to, not the dealerships, the manufacturers, kind of having their arms twisted to have to abide by these things. And that kind of stinks. But I think the cars we have now are good. I think we need to take away, actually. I think we have too much stuff in them. I think modern cars having screens in them is a good thing, but I also think it's a bad thing, obviously, in the sense of they shouldn't be on while you're driving. Maybe just your basic gauges like it always used to be, because no one's always constantly staring up and down at their gas gauge, but they are always constantly staring at the screen. Who's texting me? Who's texting me? Let me change the song. Let me set my map. Nobody really pulls over to do it. They're kind of doing, and then we have text to speech buttons on our steering wheels. It is really hard to stay positive and make one of these videos because I can just see, that's just kind of how my brain works. I try not to just be negative about everything. I just see potential issues on things, and it's hard for me to just name the positive outright without critiquing it in some way, because what the actual reality of it is this strive for engineering perfection has done all the things that are setting the modern day standard of perfection in the automotive industry, but it's doing it in such a way that is almost out of reach for modern day standards due to things like price and over engineering, mass producing, stuff like that. There are a couple cars that I actually do particularly like, and I'll talk about the performance aspects because I'm more of a performance person. I actually do think that the newer Ford Ranger, like the one I have, is a decent truck. And the reason why is because this just helps your odds. It's not exactly 100% foolproof, but buying cars or trucks that big fleet companies buy, a little bit more effort in the design is put into things like that, especially because it needs to function on a fleet-wide level, because they're going to be like the staple of what that business makes. So a lot of the Ford Rangers are used as fleet company trucks, parts trucks, delivery trucks, things like that. So the Ford Rangers are pretty stout. The 10 speeds are okay. It does have problems here and there, especially once you start getting higher in the mileage, like coolant leaking and stuff like that. EGR issues, it's a Ford Ranger. But the 10-speed so far is pretty good. I've seen some people who have the 2016 models that haven't had a single issue yet, and they're already at 200,000. And it's going to keep chugging along. Obviously, the repair aspect of it, if something does happen, is a little crazy, and that's kind of the main issue I have. I'm going to see how long I can stretch it. I hope I get as much luck as the next guy does. A lot of it's because of people doing poor maintenance too, like nobody does their oil changes or like fluid flushes or stuff like that at an interval. At least once in its life it needs to be done, at least once. Yeah, like, I don't know, like the whole speed sensor thing, it's like, you think that should pass for an inspection? It's like, well, the car still runs and drives. Just be cautious. I feel like that's the most important thing. Yeah, but all in all, I think the truck is fairly decent. It's fairly it's fairly stout in some aspects. I feel like if you were to take it off-roading like you would an older truck, I think it would I think it's kind of fragile like glass, and I don't think it would hold up too well. I did drive a Yaris GR, or was it a Corolla GR? I think it was a Corolla GR. And I'm going to be honest, I wasn't exactly a fan. The modern day delivery of power through the engine and transmission is so linear that you can't really feel it. You have the sense of speed is kind of gone, to where if you drive something that's so refined fast, you can't feel actually how fast you're going. It didn't feel very raw or visceral to me, and I wasn't exactly a fan. But did it perform? Yes, it did, and it actually did it really well. I like being in the seat, feeling like I am the driver, not the car is driving me. And the biggest issue I have is from the factory. Those cars don't have as much of a personality as I think they should. They're very quiet, and they don't really put you back in your seat for the amount of horsepower it makes. Yes, it's a 3-cylinder, and I think that's okay based on the type of car that it is. It's like a rally car, technically, if you want to call it that. I think it's a good car. I just think it needs a little bit more personality, rather. Like, it has it in the looks department, but everywhere else from the factory doesn't really scream performance car. It just feels like all-wheel drive Corolla. I drove a GR86, and that car actually had a ton of personality. Being able to rev a naturally aspirated engine up to 7,500 RPMs just has this raw, visceral feeling, and then being able to shift, and you're not actually going super fast, but you feel like, yeah, front engine, rear wheel drive. And it was refined, but it still gave you that sense of being a car. Was it as good as, like, let's say an older car that's a manual and rear wheel drive in the visceral sense? No. The modern cars today are very good at what they do. They are very refined, and they do perform very well. The one problem with the GR line is that they catch on fire a lot, and I guess I won't talk about that much because, again, try and keep this positive. But at the same time, it's just a little, I don't know. God, I just want to talk about it in a positive light, but it is just so difficult. Like I said, I have a hard time, like, trying to make things sound good because I just see the problems with it. Because there are a lot of problems with it. I know how the engineering aspect of certain things can be so much better. And I think certain cars really kind of did that more justice rather than these modern ones. What do other modern cars do that's actually good? They do certain ones get really good gas mileage. Like, we're at the point where certain Priuses now, I see people hypermiling them and they're getting 80 miles to the gallon. Which is pretty insane. If you want to take in cost of repair versus, price of car and price of gas, you are saving on gas. I do agree with that. I think that they're more efficient. I think it kind of defeats the purpose a little bit because of how they're being manufactured. We're still digging holes in the ground, and we need to build factories in order to produce cars that don't make pollution, which is a little counterintuitive. I do think they help with smog in smog-dense areas. Do they perform well, though? Not exactly, and I will give them this. They do not need to perform well in the engine department. In comfort and cruising, and to be honest, even handling on a daily basis is perfectly normal and perfectly fine. I'm biased. I like sportier feel, obviously. And I just think that the modern day engine is very lethargic and it's a lawnmower. And it doesn't need to be anything else other than that because it's supposed to be economical. It's not built for horsepower. So I'll give the Prius that. I don't think it's a terrible car. But modern day cars as a whole, I think are really refined and good at what they do. I think it wouldn't be a problem if it was affordable. That's the biggest thing. If everyone had the money, I think this would be less of an issue. I think it's really just a money issue. Because we can be engineering masterminds and we can make variable compression ratios like the Nissan Titan and all these advanced variable valve timings and make a naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine make 300 horsepower NA if we really want to, and put it in a street car and mass produce it if we really wanted to. But is that, economically right? Is that manufacturing properly? How's the financials look? There's all these limitations, and you're supposed to formulate a car around these limitations while also trying to appease a certain group of crowd and your bosses and in a timely manner. And there's a lot of factors that go into it. But all in all, I think the cars do actually do their job decently. I just think that they are at a point where it's a financial issue and a governmental legislation issue, regulation issue. And, I think the only thing we can do is if you bought a new car now, that's perfectly fine, but I would just make it last as long as you can. I wouldn't recommend buying another one right now. See, this is tricky because it's kind of hard to... I can usually stretch out a video on my rants and how I talk in my mind about the negatives on certain things and make it go for 40 minutes long. But I'm really struggling to figure out what makes these cars, good. It's like, yes, it helps with the environment, but it does go against my moral basis of I think it's all relative unless it's in the terms of smog. It's like, okay, does it help global warming? I'm like, no, probably not. But it also probably doesn't affect it as much as we think. I think we need more data on it. And, I think obviously smog is an issue. I think that, it does help in the sense of smog if you build all your manufacturing plants in areas that are dense in populations and you have your car in an area in a dense population like New York City or California or, any type of city at all. And it'll help down, with the air pollution. But it's just, I think that it's being overshadowed by all of its flaws, because I think, and to be honest, in a lot of terms, depending on how you look at it, I look at things from more of a, mechanical, makes sense kind of view rather than look at all these gadgets I have kind of view. I am biased. I am more simplistic in my mentality than I am for over-engineering something that I believe doesn't need to be over-engineered. Like if we build a tire and a wheel, I think that it is a tire and a wheel and we should keep it that way. And we shouldn't be spending thousands and thousands of dollars trying to make the best wheel possible and also putting that best wheel possible on mass production amounts of cars, because I think it's unnecessary. And I think if a customer is that in-depth and wanting to change the wheels on their car, there are other people in the world and they would probably do it on their own if they really wanted to. I think it's the manufacturers and dealers' job to give you a car as a base model, as a platform, and if you feel like it's not hitting that bar, there are options for you to get that work done to it from other types of markets in the free market, like subwoofer amplifier shops or subwoofer people who install subs, people who install performance parts, people who install things for comfort. And there are custom car builders out there. There's something for everything. And if you want a specific result on your car, you can either do it yourself or you can pay somebody else to do it. And essentially, it's kind of cutting out that middleman, and the manufacturer is trying to do things like that in shop at home. And yes, it does take away from the market of other people. but it also isn't being done in a, a passionate way, I guess you can say. It doesn't have a personal touch to it. Feels very cold from a manufacturing sense. But I'm going to leave it there. I'm sorry, I don't really have super positive views about everything. That's kind of where I'm at. That's kind of what I think. I don't even know what I'm going to title this video because I don't want to lie, but that's it for now, I guess. Peace.